Welcome to yet another episode of Curiosity Bites. So, my curiosity, which is kind of like a large animal that trails around my house and drives me nuts and drives the other half nuts, that it likes to go off and nibble on things. And because I have ADHD and Asperger's, as I said in a little subscribe me video, go and watch that, have a fun time. I'm perpetually restless. I tend to be physically restless, and I'm also intellectually restless because this is number 2 video. Gotta get people conditioned. This is how the mind works. So there is a substance, a product that I consume good amounts of. It's caffeine, and I will get around to exploring caffeine as part of Curiosity Bites. But one of my main sources of caffeine is this stuff. Hopefully you can see it through the shiny wrapper that I haven't got rid of. It's tea. I buy this from a Afghan shop in Dandenong, which is about 15 kilometers that way. And I drink this by the litre. Someone asked me how many cups of tea I have in a day. And I went, you are talking about litres, aren't you? You are talking litres. 1,000 mils. So I am told reliably that there are 2 extremely popular beverages on the planet. One is water, and yes, you've just guessed the second most popular beverage. It's this stuff, tea. There it says English tea right there. So tea and water are the world's most favorite beverages. Alright, lunch. 90% of the world will drink tea. It's chai, cha, te, tea. That's 2 or 3 different languages. 4, chai, cha, te, tea. Yeah, that's 4. We can count 4 fingers. If you got your tea culture via the Silk Road, that little trading route out of China into what used to be the Roman Empire, and then later on just Western Europe, those cultures tend to call it cha. So if they got overland through west of China, it's cha or chai. That's the reason why the Indians call it chai. Apart from the fact that part of the original geographic location of it is actually in what is now India. Was back then, but is now. If it's tea or te, you got it courtesy of a boat. So Asia discovery, 16th century onwards, 1500s plus. Spanish go out, conquer stomp on large parts of the planet, conquer the Americas, make an absolute killing, literally and figuratively. Lots of gold, lots of bright shiny objects, lots of dead Amerindians, and they end up in the Philippines. Immediate contact with China. So the whole that rate of exploration leads to lots of boats ending up in Britain. So what is tea? Anyone who's brewed tea realizes it's actually dried up leaves. But what leaves? If you're in Australia and you're in the southern states where I am, you will more likely have a camellia bush in your garden. I have a part-time job doing garden maintenance, and I would say 70 to 80% of the gardens I wander into have some form of camellia in the garden. They are all Camellia japonica, a Japanese camellia. My job is basically not dying and flowering profusely. And they do them extremely well. It's hard to see a dead camellia. In fact, so disclaimer, if you kill a camellia in your garden, just hang your head in shame and go off and become an accountant or something boring for a job, because you're not meant to be a gardener. So tea, the flowering camellia that we see in our gardens is Camellia japonica. The tea that we drink is Camellia sinensis. Yeah. Sinus, it means China, as in Anglo-Sino relations or Sino-American relations involves China. Old Cathay, the Far East, the mysterious Confucians, that crap. Okay, Beijing, basically. I think Beijing, you've got China. So when Linnaeus, the guy who set up this whole scientific name type thingy, say a family, genus, species, then subspecies, Carl Linnaeus, back in the 17th, 18th century, decided that because Linnaeus, by the way, was a Swede, most of Sweden's tea was coming through China, so it's a camellia, and because everyone was sourcing their tea from China, sinensis, it had to be a Chinese tea. But ignore the fact that it's actually Yunnan and Assam, which is where some teas come from. We'll just ignore that for the moment because Carl was a European, and Sweden's a long way from China. It's literally the other end of the Eurasian landmass. Okay, so we can forgive Carl for his couple of mistakes. So that's where tea fits in. It's a camellia. It's camellia with a whole lot of caffeine. Here's a little fact of it, is originally the good stuff was green tea. Now, in Australia, there's black tea, which powers me along, and then there's green tea, and green tea's got kind of like a hippie reputation. Black tea's the serious stuff. But when my ancestors, showed up in China wanting to buy this wonderful caffeinated beverage, the Chinese were a bit shifty. These boys had a product that they were basically flogging off to the Mongols. Let's go say, okay, you're barbarians, go and drink this, what they considered garbage. They would literally sell kilogram bricks of black tea to the Mongols. And the Mongols would go off and get really hyper and perky and just do Mongol things. So when the English and that showed up and wanted to start trading, the Chinese thought, okay. And much to their surprise, the English, although initially were interested in green tea, began to really prefer the black tea, the garbage that the Chinese went. It's stuff where, they'd fermented it too long. The Chinese didn't like it. It was too tannic and, fuzzy mouthfeel. You know what it is, drink black tea, you find out the reason why the Chinese didn't like it. Things that green tea doesn't do. Green tea, you can drink it all day with no milk, no sugar. Try drinking black tea and I end up with a horrible mouthfeel. Yeah, I completely understand where the Chinese are coming from. So they started offloading the garbage onto us. There then comes a problem. The English start consuming that much tea that it begins to affect the balance of trade. The British are basically bankrupting themselves. In fact, it's the reason why the American Revolution kicks off. It's because the whole Boston Tea Party is tea was initially a luxury beverage. It had 100% tax on it. So the Americans were cracking the socks over the no taxation without representation because tea was a luxury good. It was the Ferrari of its day. Okay, it's the fine wine diamonds, girl with got the what's it's off the shelf. That's what tea was. It was the luxury consumable of its day. Massive tax. The Americans crack the socks and then kicks off a revolution. But anyway, the British are buying so much of this stuff out of China that it begins to affect their gross domestic product. So what did the British do? What the British did in the late 18th and early 19th century is they went and became the world's biggest drug dealer. Yeah, you heard it right here. The British Empire, I say, good man, let's send in the redcoats. God save the Queen. If you don't subscribe, I'll keep on singing terribly at you. They became the world's biggest drug dealer. Now, whilst the British are bankrupting themselves buying the Chinese tea, in order to claw back some of the money, they hit upon the one substance that China could not get enough of. Opium. Today's heroin. Heroin's just a refined form of opium. Opium poppies secrete sap. You can put it in blaze and just basically sleep off and lovely fluffy pink clouds. And no, I haven't ever tried it. Just been on opiates due to kidney stones, and I know what those fluffy pink clouds are like. So the British start pumping in opium to pay for the tea that's heading the opposite direction. The Chinese Empire cacks the sooks. They start jumping up and down and being unpleasant towards these English drug dealers that are pushing opium to pay for the tea, and there are high rates of opiate addiction in China. And the Chinese don't much like having drugs pushed on them, so they crack the sooks and start killing English people and shutting down warehouses and that in Canton, or modern Guangzhou. So the British, well, you can't go doing that. We're white. You know, this is unfair. We're bankrupting ourselves buying your endless amounts of black tea, and the only way we can actually compensate, claw back some of the money, is by flogging you an even more addictive and more dangerous substance, and you're now cracking the sooks because we're returning the favour. Tea makes us perky, opiate makes you addicted and unproductive. So the British go to war, as you do, because after all, you're losing money because you're buying so much tea and you're trying to push drugs, and people object to having drugs pushed on them. I end up with Hong Kong. Yep. So all you Cantonese speakers out there, Hong Kong is a direct result of an opiate war. The British Kowloon, Nine Dragons, Kowloon in Cantonese, Kowloon ends up in British hands because the British had in the gunships and the redcoats and forced the Chinese Empire to concede a couple of bits to the mainland and a couple of the islands off it. Never been to Hong Kong. Don't crucify me on their geography. So that's basically tea. It's the relative direct cousin of the camellia that's found in so many Southern Australian gardens. As for geology, it is, if you go down to far west Yunnan, and I've included a map in this, it's that little Assam, Nagaland, you've got Myanmar, China, India, all forming that little route. It's generally there. That's where it comes from. And bear in mind, as I remind you, this stuff is actually the garbage the Chinese were flogging off to the dumb ones. The first of it starts the dumb Mongols, then it's the dumb white clucks. You can't get enough of it. So this is Curiosity Biting on tea, one of my favourite beverages, and one reason why I stay so thick, it's so energetic. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share, and we'll get back to more Curiosity Biting. There's a whole world out there with my curiosity to go and look under and look up and ask questions about. And above all, if you want me to go and explain something to you, part of the history of something, and comments, I'll catch you around. Like, subscribe, like, and share, and I'll be with you. Bye.